Welcome back to another episode of The
pursuit of progress.
What is up, everybody? Hope you guys are having a great day. Spring is sprung, as they say. Weather is getting nice, and I know Ben and I are both super pumped on a new season upon us. So, again, though, guys, thanks again for joining us. Ben, here with my co-host Ben today. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great. I feel the same way. These temperatures are warming up. Spring as we get into summer is my favorite time of year. So really enjoyed this last week or so.
You had your brother out who was on one of our earlier podcasts. He was out with his family for a week staying with you, and you guys had some good family times together.
Yeah, we had a great week. He was visiting from Tulsa, Oklahoma, and we don't get to see him that often, really a couple times a year. So he has 4 kids. It was great getting to spend some time with them, and then just catch up, share ideas, talk about investing, personal growth, financial growth. And I just love being around him because he's one of those individuals that's very motivated, that's very self-driven. And I just, it's very kind of intoxicating to be around other people that are going to challenge you, push you, and, just really inspire you. So it was a really, really great week.
Yeah, I'm sorry I wasn't able to see you two in person together. I think you guys have very similar personalities when it comes to personal growth and investing, and just have a very similar mindset on a lot of that. So, yeah, I'm sure you
It's
guys
true.
had some.
We're very similar in a lot of ways. So
So yeah, but
he's
yes, that's
a
good.
little more on the crypto.
He is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, guys, kind of on that same note, that's what our topic is for today. We're just going to be talking about, how personal growth can really transcend into every area of your life.
Mhm.
I know I've seen that through Ben over the last few years, along with just something that I've been focusing on with myself too. So I think we're both pretty passionate about this topic, and could probably even lead into some additional future podcasts going into more specific, actionable ways to get this implemented in your life if you haven't already. So, Ben, what's your opinion on this? What do you want to talk about first?
Yeah, I mean, I'm the same way. Personal growth for me is something that has been absolutely life changing, and it was something that I didn't really understand the significance and the importance of personal growth really until I started seeing others, just transform their lives. And one of those people was my mom. From the person that she was from when I was a child to a teenager to a young adult to a grown man. She really, really transformed her lives, over the years and the decades. And it really is true. We're either growing or we're dying. We're either moving forward or we're moving backward. And that's something that I truly believe. And that's why I do believe in personal growth. And, kind of starting off, let me ask you some questions. Um, what does personal growth mean to you? And why do you think it's so important for folks and individuals to prioritize their personal growth and really make it a priority?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of directions I could go with that question, but I guess first off, just how I define personal growth. I think it really just ties very closely in with just our topic of our podcast in general, the pursuit of progress. I look at, personal growth as just this pursuit of, I like to think of it as just trying to get 1% better every day and taking those kind of micro actions consistently to then see, 6 months from now, a pretty significant change. So when I think about personal growth, I
Mhm.
think about just really being focusing on the short term, what can be done today to just move that needle just a tiny bit forward, and kind of feeding off of your analogy of, if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. And even if you're just barely moving forward, that's still a step in the right direction. And although it might not seem significant at the time, you know, fast
Mhm.
forward 6 months or a year, and you'd be pretty amazed at actually how much progress and growth can happen.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way. And I think the world that we live in 2024, being in the digital age, everyone wants those instant results right now. They want to be millionaires. They want to be successful. They want to have a thriving business, family. but they don't necessarily always want to put the work in or do the things that are going to allow you to have those things. And as I've, gotten a little bit older here, one thing that you'll hear me say a lot is, you know, one of life's really big rewards, it's about the person that you get to become or the person that you have the opportunity to become. And when you can look back at who you were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and, you know, really just use that as a point of reference to see how your life is transformed, it's very rewarding and fulfilling. And I'm the same way. It's about being my best every day. It's about developing myself. Sometimes it doesn't feel like I'm moving the needle, but I have 7 or 8 things that are really important to me, and as long as I'm getting those done, I feel like it was a win.
Yeah, without getting too into the weeds on this, I think one really important just kind of tip that I've learned the hard way on is just being very intentional about not taking on too much at once, like really identifying maybe, two, three, I would
Yeah.
say maybe at the very, very most 4 areas that you're really trying to improve on and see this, progress day after day after day versus, just having 10 or 15 things that you're kind of all that are all on your list, but none are really being taken that seriously with intention. I think having a very laser focus on just a few things, and then once you get to that point where those become just routine and you are seeing significant progress without having to be so intentional about focusing on those things, then you can maybe take on an additional new thing that you want to work on. But just being kind of,
Yeah.
laser focused at first on minimal number of things that you're working on.
That is such an awesome point. My book of the year is 10x is easier than 2x by Dr. Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan, and he talks about that exact thing, where a lot of times when it comes to growing your business, growing your relationships, growing your fitness or your health, a lot of times we think about activities that we want to add to our day, but what's actually more impactful is learning what activities and habits we need to drop from our day and say no to, and learning. And I would say that's the most important step, what you just said, figuring out where are you spending your time and identifying what habits and tasks that you're not really getting a return on and that really just aren't serving you, and then starting to cut those out of your life. And as you cut those things out of your life, then replacing them with habits or activities that are going to serve you.
So kind of going into that 80-20 principle, the Pareto principle, where 80% of the results are really being generated from 20% of your daily tasks and actions that are taking place. So
Yeah,
we can apply that to this too.
that's absolutely right.
Well, let me ask you a question. Just kind of going a little bit deeper. I know you mentioned your mom. I'm really excited to share another podcast with our audience here in the near future where we're gonna talk more in depth, specifically on just how much of an impact your mom had on you, especially in the last few years of her life.
Mhm.
But just maybe just sharing with us a different, just personal experience that you could have as an experience share with the audience, just where investing in your personal growth really paid dividends and really contributed to this just improvement in a different area of your life.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And how I describe my personal growth journey is I've really had 2 spiritual awakenings. One of those was my divorce in 2018, and then the second one was my mom's passing in 2021. And those were 2 of the most difficult experiences of my entire life. But there was still a lot of beauty and positive things that came out of that, because I really do feel like it was an awakening and I was being called, and kind of an alarm went off. And it just gave me an opportunity to change the path that I was going down. When it comes to some of my experiences and kind of just staying on our earlier theme, first I had to learn how to let go of certain things. So some habits and behaviors that I changed over the past 5 or 6 years is, now I'm alcohol free. I learned to let go of alcohol. I don't drink at all. I don't make exceptions to that. I don't go to happy hours. I'm not around people that drink or have alcohol. And it was something, drinking was something that it was fun. I wasn't a huge partier, but I would go out to a happy hour, and being in the business that I'm in, there's a lot of social events. And what would happen is I could just feel, even if I had a drink or two, it would just kind of disrupt my momentum, or the momentum that I was trying to build, where you just lose a little bit of that edge. And even if it's a drink or two, a couple times a week. So I learned to let go of that. I also used to spend a lot of time, just watching TV, whether it was the news or college sports or professional sports. I love sports. I'm a big sports fan, but I learned to let go of that as well. And as I was, kind of your point from earlier, these were also habits that were taking a huge amount of my time, hours upon hours a week. And by cutting those out of my life, well, all of a sudden I had an extra 10, 15, 20 hours to go do other things with. So I cut those out, and then I started to replace those with healthier things. Going to the gym every single day at 6 a.m. with you was one. Now I'm a daily reader. You also inspired me to start reading daily. And up until about 5 years ago, I was not a reader at all. I never read anything. And now, like, becoming a daily reader, that has absolutely transformed my life. It's something that I look forward to. It's something that I love. I love reading about self-help, biographies. It's been so just enlightening to discover that, and empowering and fulfilling. So that's something that I absolutely love. Just being a more intentional parent as well. I have one-on-one time scheduled with my kids every single week, where we get to go do something. Myself and my son for a couple of hours, and then myself and my daughter. And now, my son is working out with us every morning at 6 a.m. So it's been a blessing to get to develop those relationships and have more quality time with them. And so it's just a balance of, identifying constantly what areas and what things in my life are not serving me. How can I cut those out? And then what can I add and focus my time on, that is gonna, produce dividends and allow me to become a more responsible, mature, and complete person. And another thing is just, really surrounding myself with very positive, like-minded people. I'm very blessed to, get to spend that time with you in the gym every morning. My girlfriend, Grace, she is just an incredibly gracious, giving, thoughtful person. She is so supportive. She helps me and the kids, and, whatever I want to do, she's always just extremely supportive. And so when you have the support of friends and family, and people are cheering you, and that's not always going to be the case, because there are going to be people rooting against you. But when you can have a really tight inner circle, even if it's only two or three people, that can also just make a huge difference.
And just one last kind of before we move on from that specific topic, just I think of how challenging it is at times to find those people, those like-minded, people that are adding versus subtracting to your positive growth in your life. It seems like something that's so easy to find, as far as everybody wants to get better, everybody wants these things that we're talking about. But I just
Yeah.
wanted to make a comment that it is very, very important to at least, though, be somewhat reserved on really identifying those people, and just realizing that, on the surface level, you might have a lot of people saying that they also want these same things. And you might, for example, looking for a gym person to work out with, just to have that as part of your, improvement of your daily routine. And just just be very intentional on who you're putting into those circles, because, just as much as they can improve, they can also unfortunately detract from your life. And those negative habits that maybe they have can very easily, be worn off on you as well. So it is a
And what's so
challenge.
dangerous about that is that if you aren't hanging out with the right peer group, your social group, your friends at work, if you aren't hanging out with the right individuals, you will get taken down a path. So, and you won't even know what's happening. And you will go down all of a sudden this other path, where you will start believing things, you will start doing things that don't align with your values. And so it is incredibly important to be extremely intentional. And, one of my favorite self-help mentors is Jim Rohn, and the way that he would describe it is it's time to get serious. Get serious about your life, about the people that you hang out with, about your vision. And it doesn't mean that you can't have fun, but most people just aren't serious. They're not serious about this stuff. Like, what is your vision? What do you want to do? What is your 5-year plan? What do you want your life to look like? What do you want your family to look like? Most people, they don't have a vision for all these different areas of their life. And so what happens is they just end up kind of blowing in the wind.
Mhm.
And whoever they're with, they kind of just adopt their values and they get blown this way or they get blown that way. And so it really, really is important to understand who you are, what you're called to do, what your values are, and what is your vision.
For people that are, maybe hearing this and thinking it's something that seems so out of touch or overwhelming to them, if maybe they're really in a hole where they have a lot of areas that they want to improve in their life, our episodes come out every Friday. So if you guys are listening to this on a Friday, even just picking a weekend where you're not going out on Friday night and waking up Saturday morning hungover, maybe identify like a workout class that you've never done before, or pick a hike to do with your significant other on Saturday morning early enough to keep you from, going down that path on Friday night. Just like give yourself a full weekend of really intentionally being positive and working towards these different growth areas of your life, as opposed to just, a typical lazy weekend where people are out drinking and hungover and waking up late and not really doing anything productive. Just do that for a weekend with intentionality and just see on Sunday evening how much more rewarding that was, what kind of motivation and just happiness you have going into the new work week on Monday. There's a lot of
Yeah.
ancillary benefits from this type of lifestyle that people don't really realize until they kind of give themselves the opportunity to see for themselves.
That's such a great point as well. And I would add to that, and this is a mistake that I also had made with myself. I mean, have you ever put labels on yourself where you've kind of put a label on yourself and you've even told yourself, something that isn't necessarily true? So two things for me. One thing, I had put a label on myself. I had said that I'm not a morning person. And I believe that growing up as a teenager in high school, college, even in my career, I am not a morning person. And then the other one was I'm just not a reader. I don't read. And so because I had put these labels on myself, I handicapped myself and I'd never even given myself to get up early in the morning. And now that I have an accountability partner at the gym, I have to tell you, man, like getting up early in the morning, it is one of the, I love it. I mean, and I'm not perfect. There are days where I don't get up just because I'm not feeling great, and it's not easy. Getting up early and going to the gym, it is not easy any day. Every single day, it's a battle to get up. But once you get up and you go to the gym and you work out, and I come home and I read my devotional and I pray and I do some other things that are really important to me in the morning. By the time I'm dropping my kids off at school, I mean, I've had a very, very productive morning, and that is just so fulfilling. And kind of to your point there, I do not miss alcohol at all. Getting up early on a Saturday morning, going for a walk or a run, taking the dogs out for a walk and just listening to the birds, and it's incredible. It is so much more rewarding than sleeping in till 11 a.m. because you're tired or you're hungover. And same thing with the reading. The reading every day, it's something that I had put a label on myself. I'm just not a reader, and that could not be further from the truth. I love reading. And so just be mindful of what labels you put on yourself, because I think there's a lot of us that put labels on ourselves just like that. I'm not a morning person, or I can't stop drinking, or going to happy hour is important. Like, identify what those labels are and then just test them and really be critical of those, because we shouldn't be putting labels on ourselves.
Yep, they're limiting beliefs.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you a couple questions. In your opinion, kind of staying on the personal growth thoughts, how does that transcend different areas of your life? Talking about career, health, personal relationships, creativity. What would your kind of comment be there, and what would your thoughts be there?
So I would say that everything starts with your foundation at home, or your personal life is always going to, in some way or another, transcend into your professional career and your other circles that are you're interacting with throughout the day. Career, church, your kids. Everything all starts with you, and just kind of this what the right word would be for it, but just this foundation that you're establishing. So for me, I think just a few years back, probably about 5 years ago now, maybe, when we first kind of learned about, there's a program a lot of you guys are probably familiar with called 75 Hard, which is
Yeah.
Andy Frisella, one of my favorite entrepreneurs. He has a very successful supplement company called First Form, but he has this personal growth just program that it's totally free. I can include a link to it in our show notes for this episode, but basically it teaches you just this level of consistency and structure that's needed in your life in order to accomplish growth in these different areas that you identify. And so for me, with personal growth, I think a big part of being successful with any type of goals that you're setting for yourself personally, but also professionally, is just having that structure. And I think that teaching myself that structure with these personal areas of my life that I was trying to improve on, being able to then now really put that same level of execution with work-related stuff. So, once you start seeing some success with your personal growth, you can also then very easily apply that to improving in different areas of your, professional skill set, just growing your business. If you're a small business owner, just trying to be very, intentional about improving areas of your business. So for me, I think just having that structure and that just that hard work ethic with my personal goals that I've achieved, just really being able to understand that is very, very easy to mimic in your professional life.
And when you're growing on a personal level, you're doing these different things and you're developing these different disciplines. I mean, do you feel like that spills over then into all these other areas of your life?
For sure. And I think from a professional side of this, especially if our listeners are working in a corporate setting, or where they just have a lot of coworkers and maybe they're trying to climb that ladder at work, these personal habits that you work on and improve on, your physical stature, if you're in shape, if you're eating healthy, a lot of these things are going to be very evident to your coworkers, to your potentially your bosses. And even if it's not directly related to your work performance, people see that and they're very aware of that kind of stuff. And I think that without a doubt is an underlying reason for people to give you promotions, and just to really recognize that you are working towards growth and improvement. And that's a very positive characteristic, a positive attribute to have as a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree, and that's one reason personal growth to me is so fun and rewarding and addicting, even because I feel like when I'm growing as a person, it makes me a better dad, it makes me a better leader, it makes me a better business person. I'm more intentional about my faith and my spirituality. I talk to myself in a healthier way. So I've always said that it pays dividends in every other area of my life. And like, how many other things can you do that you're going to get that type of investment? And Warren Buffett has always said the greatest investment you can make is in yourself. And
Mhm.
once you start doing these things, and once you start really investing in yourself, your life will change. And I really want to get this message out to folks, because it's so easy to not do this stuff. There's, I think of the life that we lead in 2024, it is just full of distractions. There are so many distractions, from social media to online, scrolling before you go to bed. And it is so easy to not be intentional. But if you can put the phone down, and if you can just have some quiet time and meditate, if you can really identify what you want to do and how you want to do it. And in the 75-day hard, I know that's kind of cliche because you always see that on social media, but I got to say, like, we did that 4 or 5 years ago. And that is kind of what really got me serious about personal growth. And to this day, I still work out twice a day, just like in that program. I work out with you in the morning and then I go for a run in the evening. Now, I don't do that 7 days a week, but I probably do that 5 days a week. And the other 2 days, I'm working out, both of those days. So I'm literally working out 7 days a week and working out twice a day, 5 days a week. I read every day still. I drink my water every day. So, and the reason that that's 75 days is because you want to develop those habits, and it has been so life changing for me. And I'm so excited that we got the opportunity to do that together. And if someone wants to make a change or improve their life, that is a great program to really look at and consider. And it can be intimidating if you've never done that stuff before, but challenge yourself and still go for it.
The only other thing I would add to that is from my personal experiences on multiple times of 75 hard, failing at it, and also just this whole concept of creating these structure and this routine with this different areas of improvement is just really understanding that you have to have the right reason to do this stuff. You can't be doing your daily workouts just because your significant other is pressuring you to be in better shape. You have to want it for yourself. And until you really are able to get that clearly into your mind, you're going to fail. Like you might last a week, you might last a month, you might last a year, but unless your head is in the right place as far as your intentionality and the reason behind why you're working on these areas of improvement, at some point or another, you're going to give up because you're not in the right headspace for wanting it for yourself. And that's tough sometimes to really get so passionate about wanting something for yourself to get to the point of, making these dramatic changes in your lifestyle. But just make sure if you guys are just kind of starting to think through this stuff and wondering, what maybe a couple areas for you that you want to work on improving are, just make sure that the reasoning behind whatever it is you're identifying is for you and not for somebody else.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. And kind of along that same line there, let me ask you another question. When it comes to resilience and adversity, do you feel like when you're growing on a personal level and when you're pursuing progress, do you feel like that makes you a more resilient person? Do you feel like it gives you the ability to just kind of face challenges and overcome challenges, whether it's personal, professional, relationships, in a way that maybe you didn't or you wouldn't have been able to when you weren't making personal growth a priority?
Yeah, I think it all goes back to if you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. And I think when you are in a very healthy state of daily routine and you're really you're doing a really good job on this topic on, this daily, getting better 1% daily a day. When you're filling your mind and your headspace with that positivity, you don't really have room left over in your head for this negative stuff. So when you do have a challenge at work come up, or you have something maybe in your personal life that happens that's negative, you have the ability now through this positive stuff that you're also currently doing to really just have that be where your mind goes, where your headspace is at. I think it just makes a lot of the challenges that everybody faces in life, it makes them much more easily achievable, just to kind of overcome and not be taken nearly as dramatically and as intensely as they would if you weren't also focusing on positive stuff. Kind of the glass half full instead of half empty. The glass is 3/4 full because you're really focusing on this stuff, then you don't have much room for other stuff. And no matter how bad it may seem on the outside, you're not even phased by it, and that's a muscle that gets built over time. What would have dramatically affected me 6 years ago, now it's kind of a brush off the shoulders. I think you have these levels in life that you get to, and a lot of that comes with age, but also just life experience, like you were saying. And I've seen firsthand with you, especially with your mother's passing, just literally within a couple months after that, after you kind of had gotten through some of the more intense grieving, just how dramatically of a different person you were. It's like you kind of went up a couple levels, maybe by necessity because you had people relying on you, but it was
Mhm.
just very evident. What about
Yeah, thank
yourself?
you. And I, I agree with that 100%. Since I'm now a daily reader, I love reading biographies. And over the past year, I've read Warren Buffett's memoir, Snowball. I read Sam Walton's biography, Made in America. I just finished Jeff Bezos's memoir. And, one thing that's interesting is you read about all of these really successful people, and I would also argue it's not just the adversity; it's what is your approach to adversity? What is your perspective with adversity, with problems? I think a lot of us, when we're not focused on personal growth, we're looking at our problems as just that, as problems. We have a very negative mindset, a very negative perspective with the problems in our life. But what's unique about these individuals, Jeff Bezos, Phil Knight with Nike, they always had constant problems in their business, in their personal life, because of how, their dreams and how big their goals were. And if you're going to do something that's big, like, you're just going to have problems. But but their approach is what's different. And they had the ability to overcome those problems because they looked at them as opportunities to grow. And when you do that, you can, your problems actually become blessings into your life. There's that phrase out there that successful people didn't have different problems than the rest of us. They just had different solutions. And so when you can adopt the right mindset and the right perspective when it comes to adversity and problems, and really look at them as opportunities to grow, to become more mature, to become more responsible, it gives you the ability to become unstoppable.
That was very well said. And I 100% agree. The last little comment I'll make on that is, one of my good buddies and mentors, Eli, who's in my EXP Realty group, he had this really cool presentation a few weeks back and just talking about, kind of the cycle you have, these ebbs and flows, these highs and lows you have throughout life. And these lows a lot of times could be, due to these just challenges you're facing and some of this negative stuff that maybe from the surface level is, appearing to be dramatically affecting your life. But, from a growth perspective, what I really liked what he said was anytime you're in those lows, anytime you're really up against, when just crap has hit the fan and you're just, really in a bad place, realizing in your mind that just tells you that you're on your way back up. Like you're at the low
Mhm.
and you're only going up from there, and just being able to mentally identify when you're in those lows and just realizing that, in a way you can kind of embrace that, because that's when all this growth and this real opportunity for improvement is generated is from the lows. And also, though, it's just a good motivation to know that you're at the bottom. It's only up from there.
Yeah.
Don't give up now, because, you're right around the corner is even greater success.
Yeah, and it's, your skin gets so much thicker. What you said a minute ago, it's like the things that come into my life now, as far as the problems and the challenges, I mean, they are so much more intense than the things that, were coming into my life 10 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's like what phased me 5 years ago, it does not even, I don't even spend a minute thinking about it. Um, 5 years ago, I might have a bad day. I might have a bad week. And now it's like I might have a bad 15 minutes, a bad half hour, but I'm not going to go have a bad day. I'm not going to let something else ruin my day, regardless of what's going on.
I don't know if the way you were saying that is very similar to Deion Sanders on an interview with Ed Milet last week, where he was talking about how, one of the things that probably really separates Deion as being arguably the best defensive player ever in the NFL is that
Mhm.
he made a comment that he's never had a bad day, and he said exactly what you said. He's had a bad 15 minutes, had a bad half hour, bad hour, but he's never had a bad day. And just the ability to have that positive mindset shift
Yeah.
is what a lot of these greats really attribute to as being one of their biggest reasons for success, is that mindset shift. And it's not easy. I'm still
Yeah.
struggling with it on a daily basis, but It's definitely an area that I think everybody should be very intentional on being at least able to realize where they're at with how they react to these situations, and hopefully how they can be more mindful with that moving forward.
Yeah, and that's why, being very intentional with gratitude is so important. I was talking to my kids last night. I mean, I was like, let's just sit down and talk about this for a minute. I believe that we live in the greatest country in the world, and some people might find that offensive, but that's what I believe. I believe that we live in the greatest country in the world. I believe that we live in one of the best states in the greatest country in the world, Colorado. I believe that we live in one of the best areas in the best state. You know, kids go to a great school. We have a great community. We have so many opportunities. We have access to create the life that we want. Just right there. I mean, that what I just described, that is more than probably 97% of the world has. I mean, think about that.
Yeah.
It's like if you can't be grateful and have gratitude for that, it's like and that's why it's so important to be focused on the things that you are grateful for. Just having that abundance mindset, a mindset full of supply. And that's also why personal growth is so important, because I live in the greatest country in the world and I have access to these opportunities. It's important. I'm being called. I have a responsibility to myself, to my family, to my community, to develop myself as much as I can because of where I live and the things that I do have access to. So me not doing that would actually be incredibly selfish and very irresponsible.
Yep. One of my favorite Grant Cardone quotes is just "Success is my duty." And
Yeah,
I
is
agree
that what he
with that.
says?
Mm-hmm.
It is, success is my duty. And the way that I describe that, I have that same belief, but like what I tell my kids is I owe it to past generations, meaning that I need to go down this path and raise the bar from the bar that my dad raised and the bar that my mom raised. I owe it to them, but I also owe it to you guys to be the very best. I owe it to the past and the future.
Love that. I think we end it with that. That was a very positive ending to this episode. We
Yeah.
could talk about this for hours, guys. There's obviously a lot more to discuss on this topic. Maybe we'll do a follow-up episode. I'd love to just have everybody that is listening, if you guys have areas of your life right now that you're focusing on improving, maybe leave us a comment down below in the show notes. If you guys are listening to this on Spotify or Apple, or if you're watching this on YouTube, even just leave us a comment there. We'd love just to engage with you guys and hear what kind of stuff you guys are working on to improve your lives.
Okay. Well, until next time, this is Benjamin Adams and Adam Lang with the Pursuit
of Progress
of
podcast.
Progress. All right, guys, have a great week.
Yep, we'll catch you guys next week. Bye.